Hey, this is Mike of Mike's Craft Beer, and I would like to welcome you to Pacific Beer Chat Podcast number 1. There's an abundance of beer blogs in Western Canada, but a lack of podcasts, and we hope to fill that gap. We aim to entertain, educate, and connect with local, national, and international craft beer fans. This particular podcast will serve to introduce the personalities we have brought together. This great group includes Joe Weeb, the author of Craft Beer Revolution, Terry of West Coast Beer Geek, Mike of the Beer Raider, and Steve, who also writes for Mike's Craft Beer. I'll start with the introductions. If you don't know me already, I'm Mike, and I founded mikescraftbeer.com about 3 years ago. My love affair with craft beer started with Dead Frog Brewing and Central City Brewing, for the most part. It really didn't click until years later, though, when Steve, my other writer and best friend, started bringing over all kinds of different craft beer. My passion for craft beer kind of skyrocketed from there, and I wanted to start expressing myself more and informing others about what good beer can be. And from that, my blog was born. And when I'm not blogging, I'm usually hiking and working off the beer. And, yeah, I'm drinking a little Moody Ale, smoldering smoked porter right now.
Very nice.
All right, once I find the most here, I'll pass it off to Joe.
Hey, well, I'm Joe Weeb, and I'm the Thirsty Writer. I don't know if my shirt is showing up on here, but anyway, the Thirsty Writer. I've been writing about beer now for almost 10 years for newspapers and magazines, and then a few years ago, I wrote my book, The Craft Beer Revolution, The Insider's Guide to BC Breweries. The first edition came out in 2013, and the brand new one is just out now, second edition. Where's my camera? There it is. And I'm also a co-founder of Victoria Beer Week, which we launched last year in March, and we're just heading into now this coming weekend. There's a little flyer there you can see. I'll be talking about that a little later in the podcast. What else do? I do seminars. I talk about craft beer. I host events. I talk about craft beer on the radio, I meant to say, CBC Radio here in Victoria. And I host events talking about craft beer, like the business of craft beer and things like that. And guest lectures at universities and colleges and stuff like that. And yeah, just love doing what I'm doing right now. And I'm drinking a Driftwood Farmhand Saison. Delicious. Thanks.
How about you, Terry?
Yeah, so I am the author of westcoastbeergeek.com. Right now I'm actually drinking probably what I would consider the best Imperial IPA in BC, brand new release from Four Winds. It's called Vexillum, hard to say, but good to drink. And I've been blogging for just over a year. I'm a certified beer enthusiast through the Prud'homme program and hoping to further my education there. And I'm also a family guy, so when I'm not working or writing about beer, I'm hanging out with my kids and the rest of my family. So.
Perfect. How about you, Mike?
I'm Mike with thebeerraider.com. I've been blogging for a year and 3 days. I just got the update from WordPress. So
the bill.
yeah. I started blogging just for the reason that there's so much great beer out there, and there's too many people not drinking it. The swill that people pass off as beer is unacceptable, and we need to spread the word. And so I write from the perspective of the everyman. What's good? Why is it good? I don't get into the specifics of what you can get into. And I just write because it's fun. Today I'm drinking like Terry.
Oh, double Vexillum.
Vexillum, fresh from the brewery today. I spent a good hour there.
Nice.
Hard not to.
Well, I had the taster, and I had to stay a little longer because I had a pint after that and couldn't drive.
The 9% beer, yeah.
Yeah. I'm newly married, so in my free time, I'm learning what that means to be newly married and the fun that ensues.
Perfect. All right, how about you, Steve?
I'm Steve. I'm the quiet guy over at Mike's Craft Beer, and I'm pretty much responsible for Mike spending all of his money on beer. I'm the one who started handing him craft beers and not telling him what it was until he liked it. And,
Thank you, sir.
and my fault. Yeah, I kind of go for the everyman approach as well. I like beer. I think beer is interesting and it's worth talking about rather than just chugging whatever light beer is on tap. And the more you know, the more options you have. On that note, I'm drinking Phillips Longboat Chocolate Porter.
Nice.
And yeah, side notes about me, I'm a huge geek. Board games, comic books, video games, swords. And,
Nice.
and that's me in a nutshell.
Perfect.
Mike, back.
All right. I'll pass it off to Joe here. You can talk about Victoria Beer Week that's almost about to begin.
Yeah, so Victoria Beer Week, we launched last year, and as with many beer weeks, it's more than a week, it's 9 days. We're doing 9 days straight. We have 22 or 23 different events spread out between March 7th to 15th. So we start this Saturday with our opening cask night at the Victoria Public Market, which features, I think, over 20 casks. We're featuring all island breweries and cider and mead on this first one. Last year we had one cask night. This year we have two. We have one on each Saturday. So the first one is all island breweries, and the second one at the end of the festival is featuring breweries from the mainland and Okanagan and as far out as Fernie, I guess. Spread out in between there, we have a whole bunch of different events. I'm not going to list them all. It's far too many, but some of the more interesting ones are Thunderdome, where we're launching 10 brand new beers from 10 breweries, and we just announced all those 10 beers yesterday. So that includes island breweries as well as mainland ones. Four Winds has a new one coming out, a Grisette, which is a light saison, and there's actually two Grisettes. Lighthouse has a rhubarb Grisette, and they thought they were brewing the first Grisette in BC, and then Four Winds said they're doing one too. So they can say they're brewing the first rhubarb Grisette, I guess. So that's Thunderdome is a Wednesday next week, the 11th, and it's going to be a pretty awesome event. I'm hosting a couple events. There's one called Drink in the Story that was Sean Hoyne's idea of Hoyne Brewing here in Victoria.
Nice.
And the idea there is that three brewers are going to talk about one of the beers they brew and what is really special about it, the whole story behind it. So it's kind of a mix of storytelling in beer, and when everybody's there, they just get to drink that one beer while that brewer is talking, and then they'll be socializing afterwards for each one. So Sean Hoyne is obviously doing his. He's talking about his Helios, which is a Dortmunder lager, and Ben Colley from Dagrad is going to be there to talk about his blonde, and David Bowkett from Powell Street is going to talk about Old Jalopy, the one that won the Canadian Brewing Award and got him, Powell Street's set up as successful as it is, basically. So a few other events, lots of things going on. I'm launching my book as part of the Craft Beer Revolution Town Hall on Friday the 13th, which will be exciting. And I mentioned we have the closing cast night, and then the final day is the Brewmaster's Brunch, which is a awesome six-course beer-paired brunch prepared by some of the top chefs on Vancouver Island. Each course is prepared by a different chef, and they pick a beer to pair their food with, and it was amazing last year. I'm looking forward to it already. If I can last that long, 9 days straight, we'll see.
Nice.
So come on out. It's going to be a really good week, I'm sure. Very excited.
Perfect, and I'll actually be there for the last weekend to enjoy the last 2 days, so should be a great event.
You can hold me up.
Sounds good. Alrighty, well, let's get back to the theme of the episode, which is getting to know us. So let's talk about our favorite local places to grab a beer, be it a bar, a brewery, whatever that is. So why don't we start with you, Terry?
Sure. So even though I'm drinking, like I said, a Four Winds, probably my favorite place to go and just grab a beer is Steel and Oak. I like the atmosphere of that place. You just go in there, they've got their records, there's no TVs, there's nothing else there. You just go sit there and enjoy your beer, and you can bring a book or whatever. During the day, I'll bring a book. During the evening, it's probably a little too loud in there to read that. But I love going to that place. It's right on the waterfront of the river there, and really good price beer, really good beer, and it's just a nice atmosphere. So when I think about a place I'd like to go, my first choice is really around the atmosphere, obviously as well as the quality of the beer. But yeah, that's the one thing that I look for. So I like that place. Four Winds is nice too. Not quite as good of a hangout, in my opinion. I'd rather go to Steel and Oak. And then as far as just purely out of how close it is, Big Ridge Brewery. I know, Mike, it's your favorite. they have that little bus that drives you around. I really like that.
That
and they also have a really good kids night too. So they're a good local for me.
All right. Well, if you stop joking there, Mike, how about you?
That's 9% strong.
Slow down, son.
Yeah.
Well, he is newly married.
That's true.
That's right. Mine kind of is twofold because I spent the last 5 years living on the island, and I just moved here in back here in September. So I have two. When I was younger, I loved Steamworks in Vancouver, and I've gone back there a couple times since I've lived here. I just love the atmosphere in there. It's got their dining area, and then downstairs is kind of a funkier, kind of a barish area. It's got a good story to it, and it's great beer at the same time. But the last 5 years, the one place that I would always go to when I was in Victoria was Spinnaker's. It's just consistently great beer. The food is awesome. They do cool. They use beer as an ingredient in their food, which I think is one of the most important things you can do as a beer pub. It's got, in my opinion, one of the most underrated patios in Victoria. If you get up in the upstairs part, the patio there is just a wicked view of the harbor. And it's got a great piece of BC or Canada brew pub history when it comes to craft beer. So it's just, it's close to my heart. Spent a lot of nights there. Some I can speak about, some I can't speak about. But I gotta say, when it comes to the best one right now, I gotta say Spinnaker's.
Perfect. How about you, Joe?
Well, you're still in my thunder, Spinnaker's. I'm living here in Victoria, so I have to mention Spinnaker's as well, of course, as being the birthplace of the whole brew pub culture in Canada. But it's interesting. We don't have a lot of these breweries. This whole new model of breweries that have erupted in and around Vancouver, like Brassneck and Steel and Oak. I love Steel and Oak as well. I agree, that's a great spot. That have these tasting lounges, right? Where you can go and sit and drink beer by the glass like you would in a pub. And we don't have that yet in Victoria. We're hoping that one might open soon, but it's not an option here. So that's something that I really miss over here because I love it when I'm over in Vancouver and I'm visiting all those places. I really like Brassneck to visit for that reason, and 33 Acres. I know it's a totally different vibe, with that whole white kind of IKEA cafe type look, but I really like the vibe there too. There's a place here in town that just opened not a brewery but a tap house called the Drake here in Victoria, the Drake Eatery and Craft Beer Parlor, and it's right across from Swan's Brew Pub. It's on the outside of Market Square, if you know Victoria. It's a little spot. It's about 100 seats or so, kind of spread in a two rooms in an L shape kind of thing, and they got 29 taps, and but they're just constantly bringing in lots of rotating through and bringing lots of interesting beers from all over the place. The owner Mike will go over to Vancouver to visit the new breweries and grab stuff, and he has connections with distributors coming up from south of the border. So there's always something interesting on from away, which is great. And it's like the first place I think that outside of the Alibi Room that Brassneck was served, for instance. So it's pretty cool that way. So yeah, probably I'd say that's my favorite place to go right now.
Perfect. Well, for me, it used to be places like St. Augustine's and Alibi Room when I was first getting into craft strange beer all the time. But the more you get into beer, the harder it is to find those different beers. So now it's usually more going to the brewery, places I'm really liking right now are Strange Fellows and Parallel 49. They're both usually really busy, but it's just about the beer. There's no TVs. Although Parallel has the TV, but it's just of the brewing. So it's actually the brewery itself. But I want a good atmosphere. I want good people there, and both those breweries seem to have those in spades. So that's usually where I go. How about you, Steve?
I couldn't decide between two, so I split it a little bit. If I'm just going to the brewery itself, I actually really love going to Moody Ales. It's a little out of the way, but it's small, it's intimate. The guys doing the brewing are also coming out and filling your beer, and you can ask whatever questions you want, run into what they're coming up with next, or the new cask. I'm looking forward to that. I think they're going to cask a smoked porter sometime soon that I'm really excited about. And plus the rotating food trucks. But it's also the place I've had the most random conversations with strangers ever, which is always a plus in my book.
Same here.
I've talked politics, dogs, beer, their favorite candy with this gigantic trucker dude. And so, if nothing else, everybody's friendly. My second pick was Tap and Barrel down on Falls Creek, mostly because they got a good beer list, the food's fantastic, and I've hung out with so many good friends there and just spent 4 or 5 hours talking. And they're never rushing you out, they're never trying to hustle you along, and it's a little more bouncy, a little more upbeat, and I really enjoy it.
Perfect. All right, why don't we move on to our personal experience going to local breweries and why we enjoy finding the source of the beer instead of just going to the liquor store. Why don't we go back to you, Terry?
Sure. So, I mean, other than, it's kind of nice to meet the brewers and talk to people and that. I don't get into that too much, but one of the reasons I actually just like going to the source is the fact that the beer has been stored properly. It hasn't been transported in a warm truck. It hasn't been sat out in the wrong kind of place. It hasn't been shooken around or anything like that. They take care of their beer, and it hasn't gone anywhere but usually generally sitting in the brewery in a good spot, waiting to be tapped, and then into your glass. I love that aspect. That's actually my favorite thing. I think we actually have a lot of problems with transportation of alcohol and beer in our province. I've certainly had some stores where I swear everything I buy from them just doesn't taste as good as from other ones, and that actually kind of ruins the experience for me. So I prefer to get beer from the place. Like anytime friggin' Four Winds puts out an Instagram, I'm 10 minutes away from them, so I'm there for a new release almost instantly. So I prefer to do that. That's my favorite. I also like the fact that you're getting it right from the brewery. You're paying them. You're not paying someone else. So I like to at least think maybe a little bit more money goes in their pocket when I do that. I may be wrong on that, but I think it's good. There's a little less overhead that you're paying. You generally get a better price, and it feels good to actually go up to the person who brewed the beer or someone who works there, have a little sample of it, and say, "This is awesome. Give me 6 bottles." So I like doing that.
Makes sense to me. How about we mix it up a bit? And Joe, why don't you go up next?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I've traveled around a lot visiting breweries for my researching for my articles and books, and I've even before these new brewery tasting lounges started opening, I really enjoyed going to the breweries and meeting the people there, and I found that if I made a connection with the people at a specific brewery, like if I really felt a good strong connection with the people, then the beer tasted even better, Like the beer, I could buy a bottle of Fernie in the government liquor store and it tasted fine. But when I met the people in Fernie and I made the strong connection, there's such a great group of people that work at that brewery. Then that beer is an extra 10% better now every time I taste it. Because I think about them and I remember the fun times I had, hanging out with them and so on. And that that's happened with several breweries around BC, like Townsite Brewing. I have the same kind of strong connection with them, for instance, and Cannery and Penticton. So these are places that don't even necessarily have those tasting lounges, but I love that whenever I go and visit, I feel that strong bond again with the people there. And when these tasting lounges start opening, it just increases that because then I get to sit there and drink it by the pint and not kind of surreptitiously drink it in the back brewery with the brewers or something like that. But it's extra special. So yeah, it has to do a lot for me with the people, I guess, with going to the source and connecting with the people that actually make the beer and sell the beer and put it out there. So yeah.
Perfect. How about we go to Steve now?
For me, it's sort of a mix. What I actually really like is meeting all the people, not just the brewers and the owners and all the workers there, but also the people who come to a brewery. You meet some of the oddest people, you meet some of the coolest people, you can have random conversations, like I said, and I do really enjoy talking to the brewer. I like that strong connection, like Joe was saying. Moody Ales, before they even opened, I got to meet a couple of the guys and spend a couple hours with them, and I got to try their home brews before they were even in their space, and it really made it feel close. Like I really wanted them to open. I wanted them to succeed. And when I got my hands on their beer, it tasted really, really good. In part because of that connection. And other than that, it's fresh. You can get the weird casks, and yeah, all those reasons.
Perfect. How about you, Mike?
It's kind of to echo what people have been saying. Is it's cool to kind of meet the people behind the beer, and being a marketing guy, it's nice to see a beer on a shelf and you see the label and you kind of get what it's about, and then you meet the people behind it, and when you get that connection, when the people meet the brand, it just reinforces everything in yourself, and it just, as Joe was saying, it escalates how good that beer is to you, where to just someone that picks it up off the shelf might not see the specialness of it. And so it's cool to kind of have that small business feel where you know where this is coming from, and so you can rely on the quality, and you know that these people are invested in what they're doing and they really love what they're doing. And it's just I don't even have a word for kind of how cool it is to see everyone behind it, the people that come in, the regulars, the norm type feeling you get when certain people walk in. And it's as a new blogger, it's just kind of a cool way to learn about a brand, learn about beer, learn about different things that I didn't even know existed. It's just one of those things that if you're interested in a beer, especially BC beer that you can find in the store, it's so easy to stop in to that brewery and check it out. You get fresher beer because you can get it in your growler or liter bottle, and it just adds to the beer. 20%, studies say. Those are my own studies.
Perfect. So one of the reasons I fell in love with craft beer was actually going to the breweries. I love how everything's made. It doesn't matter if it's beer or those how it's made shows. It's always just neat to see how much work goes into it. It's not just pushing buttons. It's actually getting in there with rakes. It's getting in and lots of sweat. And it's great to see the passion from the brewmasters and the brewers. Just seeing how much they love their job. Because not everyone loves their job. And it's good to see that it's a business it's not about just working. It's about going out there and doing your best every day and just showing how much you love your job. And it doesn't hurt. You go into the tasting rooms and you've got some of the best beer enthusiasts out there that want to chat beer and just get to know you and find out why you love beer. And it just helps make you feel part of the community. That's why I love finding the source. All right, why don't we go on to local breweries. What are your impressions of our local beer scene and how it compares to around the globe? Be it Portland, Seattle, wherever else. How about we start with Steve?
I I don't know how much everybody else here has traveled, so I'm just going to start with the most far-flung one I've got, which was I was in Munich for Oktoberfest for my honeymoon, actually. And I have an indulgent wife.
Awesome.
And it's a fantastic beer scene, but it's such a different beer scene. You go into any pub or any one of the beer tents, and you just order a beer. They have Warsteiner, or they have I can't remember the brands off the top of my head. I was pretty drunk most of that trip, so they're not big on broad varieties, but at the same time they're very proud of doing the ones they do really, really well, which is a pretty sharp contrast to what we have here, which is all about what's the different thing we can do, or the weird thing we can do, what additive can we use, or how can we stand out. Whereas there it's all about doing something the way it's been done for like 600 years. So I think our craft beer scene is certainly different, probably more diverse than it is around the world. But at the same time, that's not to say everywhere else is bad, just different.
Perfect. How about we move on to Terry there?
Yeah, so my first sort of big...
Quickly.
Sure. Well, we were just talking there about Munich at the start, and yeah, it's interesting because I've traveled a fair amount in Europe and down the coast here to Portland and so on, and it's tough to compare because every place has their own rules, right? Their own kind of guidelines that kind of set up how beer is served and how what your experience is going to be. It's like here in BC, we have these new tasting lounges. I say new because they've only existed by law for about 2 years now, and it's totally changed the whole landscape for how beer is served here in BC. And by adding that to the equation, by having the option to go sit in a brewery and drink a beer by the glass, and those tasting flights and all the rest of it, is changing, I think, really radically changing BC beer culture in a good way, in a positive way. I think we're moving away from kind of a scene where brew pubs were kind of the dominant force, where you'd go to a brew pub or to a tap house. But now we're getting this idea of every brewery can have its own its own vibe, and you can have your experience by going right to the source like that. Yeah, and tap houses too. I think the idea of a bar or a restaurant focusing on a wide range of beers and shifting through those styles quickly so they don't just have the same taps. When I first moved back to Victoria from Vancouver in 2012, I was a little shocked, to be honest. There was great beer everywhere. There was tons of craft beer everywhere, but it was the same 12 or 14 taps. Like you'd have 3 from Phillips, 3 from Hoyne, 3 from Driftwood, 3 from Lighthouse, and that it would never change. And I had come from Vancouver, where I was used to going to the Alibi Room in St. Augustine's and having that, what's on tonight? What can I experience tonight? And that really was hard for me when I first moved back here. But luckily, we've got a few places here in Victoria now. We've got the Garrick's Head Pub, we've got Churchill and the Drake I mentioned earlier, and they're all between Churchill and Garrick's Head, which are basically in the same hotel. There's over 100 taps, and they're unique, between the two pubs. So there's tons of variety there. And then the Drake, as I mentioned earlier, has a really cutting-edge kind of assortment of beer. So, but I'm really interested in seeing what the future holds. I think the marketplace here in BC is going to open up even further. I anticipate in the next few years that we'll be able to fill up growlers at liquor stores. Maybe one day at a gas station. No, I don't think so. Gas stations, you can fill up growlers at gas stations in Washington and Oregon, which I think is hilarious.
Arizona too.
Obviously,
I saw that down in O'Connor.
Yeah, obviously not like at the gas pump. I don't mean that, but they have they have like a variety store, like a bottle shop that you can actually fill your growlers, and I think that's hilarious. I don't think we'll ever see that, because we still have the whole private liquor store model here, where there's only so many places that are allowed to sell beer. So I doubt that'll ever happen at a gas station per se. But But yeah, just I do think though we'll start seeing growler sales. The brewers don't want it, but I think that we will start seeing that in the next few years happening in other places. So anyway, I'll stop talking so someone else can have a turn.
We almost need our own little tap filling station where we fill it ourselves and then pay, just like a gas station.
Yeah. I'd love to push a button right now and have some Vexillum pouring into my glass.
No doubt. Terry, do you want to try again there?
Yeah. So, as I was, I don't know how much you got there, but what my first exposure to a beer sort of scene was going down to Portland with my dad a couple of times. And if you'd asked me about, how does the BC scene compare to the rest of the world, my answer would have been a lot different a couple of years ago. But after seeing, and Joe, I think you're right, that whole sort of tasting lounge implementation has really, really changed the environment here. So you got places like Steel and Oak and Four Winds and all these other places that can just sell beer without having food. And so I think that the big shift there is they no longer rely on food. Like brew pubs, I thought a lot of times relied on their food to get people in, and then they would sell them beer. With these places, I mean, if you're only selling beer, your beer has to be pretty damn good to get people in there. Right, you don't really have an option, right? So you have to make really, really good beer. Yeah. And so I think that the creativity there, the cast nights, all of these different things. I think Camera's done a really good job helping the scene there, and I would say we are pretty much on par with a lot of those places now. Like I go down to Portland now. I mean, I go there at least once a year, and I'm not. I mean, other than places like Cascade and that. And Commons, I'm not seeing anything different there now than I can get here. There is really good quality beer here, and I find that we're on the map. We really are. So I love the scene here.
Perfect. All right, I'll go next. It's so hard to believe that you look back even like 10 years ago and how many breweries were there, and now there's 20 new breweries opening this year approximately. There's going to be over 100 in BC. It's just insane. So you look back and we were nothing compared to Portland and Seattle back in the day, but beer here is maturing so fast. There's so many locations, so many choices, be it Vancouver, Victoria, going up into the Kootenays, up north there's craft breweries now. It's hard to believe. And
yeah, it's Mike, I was just going to say, it's nuts how you have places like Strangefellows brewing an old brewery, and they've been open a couple of months.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be a year before it's released, but yeah, it's crazy. And we met in Portland or Seattle yet, but with the explosion of craft beer here, sour beer, we're not far off from being one of the big destinations, not only on the West Coast but around the world. And it's starting to be noticed all across the world. Talk to people, be it from Scotland. I've been recently talking to people, and they know about our beer scene here, which is amazing. And I would have never guessed that a couple years ago.
I heard Townsite. I heard Townsite setting up a Lambic program.
Oh, that is epic!
Really? Great.
So in about 3 years.
Oh, whatever. Lambic programs, we need them all across the country.
Well, and you mentioned Strangefellows in the Oud Bruin. I mean, that's because Ian Hill has been, he's been brewing Oud Bruin since the mid-'90s, right? And so he's bringing that program over with him when started that brewery up.
And they're still trying to buy a Foder, or whatever how it's pronounced. So they're working towards starting a true sour program, not just a barrel-aging sour program.
Yeah.
How about you, Mike?
Being new, I don't have quite the experience you guys have, and coming back to Vancouver, specifically looking at the craft beer scene. Growing up, my family kind of loved waiting for the Granville Island Winter Ale, because that was our big winter tradition. As everyone would dive deep into that, and I came back here, and after living in Victoria, and it's a really exciting scene. Like, there's so much happening in and around the city itself. I spent a year in New Zealand back in 2008, 2009, and there wasn't really a lot going on. There was beer there, obviously, but there wasn't a lot going on in craft beer, and now you see a couple, of the imports coming in. There's a few craft things going on, and I keep in touch with friends I've met there from the UK, from Australia, New Zealand, France, everywhere, and they're starting to hear rumblings in their own countries of the growth of this craft beer concept. But they really look to North America, West Coast specifically, for like what's happening, what's exciting, what's going on in this craft beer industry, because we're really tackling this thing with creativity and almost a no holds barred situation. And that's what I love about living here is we've got such, you can get the fresh hop season, which is a whole other ball game, and there's just everybody wanting to get into it, but they also want to be different. And so seeing everyone come up with their different version of something, it's a really cool scene to be in and to be able to experience, and for us to be able to write about and share about.
Here.
Perfect. Well, you got anything to close this out? Any comments or anything?
Beer.
Yeah, I polished up.
Victoria Beer Week.
Yeah.
Perfect. Alrighty then. Well, I'll just say thanks for joining our inaugural podcast, and I hope you enjoyed it, and continue to tune in.
Cheers.
See you next time.
See you next time, guys.
Bye.
Alrighty, I'll